Welcome to the Eat for Endurance podcast, where we explore the connection between nutrition, performance, and health for busy, active people. I'm Claire Shorenstein, a sports dietitian and endurance athlete, and in every episode, I share evidence-based guidance, inspiring athlete stories, and practical tips on a wide variety of nutrition topics so that you can feel better, crush your endurance goals, and thrive as a human being. All right, so I'm doing something a little bit different today, a mini podcast series. The topic, GLP-1 medications. These drugs are everywhere right now, as I'm sure you're aware, but the conversation around them is often confusing and incomplete. In this 3-episode series, I'm talking to 3 dietitians, each with their own unique professional and personal experiences with these meds, to explore how they work, who they're designed for, what the science says, how they're being used in the general population, what we're seeing in athlete populations, what benefits as well as side effects we're observing, and what active people and especially endurance athletes need to understand about the potential risks and implications of these pharmaceuticals. I'm kicking things off today by chatting with Courtney Smith, a registered dietitian and diabetes specialist. As a former Division I collegiate runner turned marathoner and Ironman athlete, Courtney also understands both the science and the reality of fueling for performance. She has deep clinical knowledge and experience when it comes to GLP-1 use in the diabetic population, and she works with athletes, so she brings a great perspective to this topic. We chat all about the basics, why GLP-1 meds have exploded in popularity, what these drugs do, how the various meds differ, low versus high dosages, potential benefits and risks, appropriate versus inappropriate use of these drugs, use of GLP-1s in the athletic population, and so much more. Before we dive in, 2 quick announcements. First, I recently created a survey for my show and would really love your feedback so that I can continue to improve your listening experience. As an incentive, you'll be entered to win one of 3 prizes: a 1-month membership to Fuel for Life crew and one of 2 fueling sticker packs, all for taking less than 5 minutes to fill out my form. Winners will be chosen on May 17th. Head to my show notes to grab the link. Also, if you're enjoying this free content, there are several ways you can support my work. You can rate and review my show, share this episode on social media or with a friend, shop my affiliate codes over on eatforendurance.com, or donate a few bucks on my Patreon page. I really, really appreciate your support. All right, here is my chat with dietitian Courtney Smith. Courtney, welcome to the Eat for Endurance podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Claire. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So before we dive into today's topic, I always like to have my dietitians just give a brief overview of their background as a dietitian, but also as an athlete.
Yeah. So I've been a dietitian now for over 13 years and a diabetes specialist for 10 years. And I specialize in working with endurance athletes with diabetes and prediabetes and offer one-on-one consultations nationwide via telehealth. And I also take insurance. Personally, I started running in middle school and I ran cross country and track in high school and in college, Division I. I've done 4 marathons and an Ironman. And I've also done endurance swim relays and long distance cycling events.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I mean, I saw kind of your background with all these different things. And so I thought it would be really great just bringing your clinical and athlete perspective, both, personally and professionally, how you work with athletes. And I thought that that's a great thing to bring to the table when we're talking about today's topic, which is GLP-1 meds and what active people and endurance athletes, what they need to know about it. And I was explaining to you offline, this is the first in a series. So we're going to get into some of the basics today, but also go a little deeper as time allows. And, partly why I wanted to do this topic is, these drugs have surged in popularity in recent years. But I know that as a practitioner, you have really been dealing with these pharmaceuticals for a long time in practice, especially in your diabetic population. So I thought it would be nice to kick things off to kind of give a little history on, what you've been seeing with these drugs, because I think a lot of people are like, oh, this is new, but it's not new. So maybe you can just kind of introduce that and then we can kind of explore from there.
Yeah, that's so true. So I became an RD in 2012, and that was around the same time that Victoza was approved for the market. And I remember it wasn't that popular. And we also had like Bydureon come in, and they were all injections. And I was primarily working in the diabetes space. And to be honest, I couldn't convince patients with diabetes to take these medicines, mostly because it was an injection and a lot of people don't like needles, which I think is valid. I mean, if you like needles, that could be an issue. Um, so we'd always be like, well, this is a great diabetes medicine because it will help reduce your blood sugars. But also there's this side effect that it also may cause weight loss. But there is like a side effect of possible nausea. We're not exactly sure how it works. And that was kind of like my spiel early on in my career working with diabetes. So there were these medicines on the market. People think that GLP-1s just came about in the last few years because now they're in the press and the media. But the reality is they've been out since 2010 or 2012. So quite a while, actually. And it's a funny story because now a lot of people are interested in them, obviously, and are okay with the injections. And that's been our big positive, is that it's kind of decreased the stigma with injections and needles, and people have gotten more used to it because 10 years ago, that was not the case.
And why do you think that this has suddenly surged in popularity? I actually don't even know when Ozempic came around and when that was on the market and all these other drugs. I know some of them are a little bit newer, but yeah, why do you think this is kind of so popular now?
I think because they work. They are effective, and they've been in the media. And, in our culture, there is this desire to be thin, unfortunately. And these medications have affirmed that as well. So on one hand, for people that really need the medicine that's indicated for diabetes or obesity or overweight with comorbidities, they've been really effective and have changed lives. And then there's also this other side where people don't need them and they can be easily abused as well.
Yeah, and we're definitely going to get into that. Do you happen to know when did Ozempic kind of come onto the market? Was that kind of how it led to some kind of an increase in popularity? Because that was kind of the first one that we started hearing about, right?
Okay, I was trying to look that up a minute ago.
Because I don't remember.
I remember. You remember when it came out? So I want to say maybe 2020-ish is when I started hearing more about it. But in the last 6-7 years, I don't know. Everything is a blur.
Yeah. Totally.
But those are definitely the newer ones.
Yeah. And what's interesting too, I mean, we're going to get into a little bit about appropriate versus inappropriate use. But I mean, we do see that it's being increasingly prescribed, even outside of diabetes. There's kind of this increased accessibility. It does seem like pretty much almost anyone can get something like this. It's very, very easy to get now, which is kind of a little bit scary in some ways, given that there are risks associated. This isn't just popping a multivitamin. This is something, it's a pharmaceutical. And of course, we're seeing it all over the place in Hollywood and elsewhere in our culture. I've had clients who have told me I'm literally the only one in my friend group not on GLP-1s. So it's kind of all around us. And again, this is why I really wanted to have this podcast series so that we can kind of talk about it very openly. I know I bring my own biases to this topic and I'm trying to be really open-minded and kind of explore things. But yeah, I thought it would be helpful if we just kind of start with some of the basics, because some people, even though they have heard GLP-1 or Ozempic or whatever, they've heard these terms thrown around. A lot of people I don't think know what a GLP-1 is or what these medications are. So can we start with talking about what is the GLP-1 hormone? What is that exactly?
Sure. Okay. So I remember when I was studying for they used to call it the CDE exam. Now it's CDCES. So GLP-1 is a hormone in our small intestine, and it stands for glucagon-like peptide. So a lot of times when we say just GLP-1 medicines, we are actually just kind of shortening it to GLP-1 receptor agonist. So they mimic this hormone. So this hormone is released after eating, and it slows the stomach and it signals satiety. So just to understand glucagon, so glucagon is another hormone which raises blood glucose levels when they fall too low. So it is the opposite of insulin, essentially, which is also a hormone. So it's a little kind of confusing to explain, but essentially the GLP-1 receptor agonist medicines signal the stomach to be full and satisfied. It kind of like delays gastric emptying.
Got it. Thank you. And, everyone talks about these GLP-1 meds or GLP-1 receptor agonists, let's call it. But there are other medications like GIPs and dual agonists. I think even in talking about this topic on the podcast, I'm just saying GLP-1s because that's what people know. But really, we're talking about the whole category of like this whole umbrella of medications, of pharmaceuticals that are used for not just for weight loss, but for, all the different things like blood sugar control, all these different things we're trying to accomplish, right? So can you briefly explain the difference just so people understand that it's not just GLP-1 meds?
Yeah, definitely. And I want to add that the GLP-1s also reduce the blood sugar by enhancing insulin and reducing glucagon. And they also reduce food noise. So they're really great medicines. And then GIP medicines like it's tirzepatide is the generic name. So it actually works on two different mechanisms. So it works on the GLP-1 receptor agonist and it's GIP. So if you care, GIP is the glucose-dependent insulin-tropic polypeptide hormone. I had to look that up because
that's a mouthful.
Yeah. So we're going to say GIP. And it's also a hormone that's found in your small intestine, and it promotes fat metabolism. And it also improves the effectiveness of the GLP-1 mechanism. And the GIP medicines, or the dual agonists, I should say, they're typically better tolerated with less GI side effects.
Yeah. And so that's a great segue into just like the different medications as we know them, like the Ozempic, Wegovy, Mounjaro, Zepbound. Can you just walk us, like where do these fall in these different categories, and like which are prescribed for what purpose? Like why might someone be prescribed Ozempic instead of, say, Zepbound or whatever?
Sure. And it really all comes down to just like what they were approved for and what the companies paid for and brand names and everything. And it's easy to confuse them for sure. So semaglutide is the generic name, and Ozempic and Wegovy are the brand names for the GLP-1 semaglutide. So Ozempic is approved for diabetes, and Wegovy is approved for weight loss in the absence of diabetes.
Okay. I see. I didn't know that.
Yeah. And then we have, and those are injections. And then we have Rybelsus, which is like the oral semaglutide. And then in terms of the GIPs, we have tirzepatide is the generic name, and Mounjaro and Zepbound are the brand names for the dual agonist. So Mounjaro is approved for type 2 diabetes, and Zepbound is approved for weight loss and obstructive sleep apnea.
Can you remind us, so it sounds like if you have just diabetes and you're trying to control blood sugars, Ozempic is kind of what you're doing in the absence, and you're just working on the weight loss piece, Wegovy, and then Mounjaro and Zepbound, you said those are potentially better tolerated with GI stuff, which we'll get into in a little bit. Is there anything else, any other meds or anything else we should kind of know about these medications?
It's great to be able to pick one if you can, but typically insurance is going to dictate which one that you'll be able to have, and obviously what it's approved for. So, and also say you have a certain insurance and they're contracted with this medication, so that's the one they're going to cover. So it just really comes down to that, unless you want to pay out of pocket for a specific one. So we don't always get to pick, even with these stipulations here.
Yeah, got it. And I want to take a minute to talk about dosage. In my practice, and as explained to you, like I haven't worked with many people on these medications. I've worked with a handful, and usually they're on low dosages. So we hear a lot about kind of being on a very low dose or microdosing versus being on a higher dose. So I was wondering if you can just speak to dosages and why some people might be on a lower dose, or kind of what you're seeing in practice there.
So the microdosing thing is not something that I see with people that are getting their GLP-1s from their providers, like their primary care physician. That's something I'm seeing from people that are getting it at like compounded pharmacies or online. Not exactly sure. Most of my clients I work with have like prescribed the medicines that we talked about. And dosing is so individualized. So they have dosing schedules. So, it's recommended to start low and then you're on the medicine for a few weeks to a month-ish. And then depending on like if it's really reducing your appetite or if you're having side effects, etc., you may go up to a higher dose or not. Some individuals benefit from lower doses and they really don't need the higher dose. I've seen clients initially when these medicines first came out where providers just weren't really as familiar with them. Now, most people it's like bread and butter prescribing these medicines, but they were either on too high doses or they were dosed quicker. There was less guidance on the dosing schedules. And then I was encountering clients that basically like just didn't have an appetite and didn't want to eat and were not eating or like eating very small meals very infrequently. And that was concerning. And it was like, hey, we're going to have the conversation. Like, you're still like a living human being and you still need to eat food regardless of the appetite. And like, you don't want to lose weight too quickly because of, nutrient deficiencies, as well as like malnutrition and like essential organ function and be able to do your job and energy levels or heaven forbid exercise or do a race. It really just depends on the person because I've seen clients that are on higher doses that it really doesn't affect their appetite as much. They don't have the issues. I think it's all over the board.
Yeah. And I know you told me that you primarily are seeing these drugs being used in the diabetes context, not so much in the athlete context for what, like the people you're working with at least. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. But I thought like we can just briefly talk through, like we were talking about when it's appropriate and when it's not appropriate. So like when we're thinking about who these drugs are actually designed for, can you just walk us through like, who they're designed for, when you think it's actually appropriate to be using these drugs?
So the medications were originally designed for like pure blood sugar management, actually. And then now they're approved for diabetes and weight loss, some of them, and then some of them just weight loss or sleep apnea. So it's for obesity. So obesity is defined by body mass index, BMI of 30 or greater. So that is the indication. And then if an individual is overweight, so BMI of 27 with like comorbidities. So they're already having some like medical issues that it would be important to address that could get worse essentially with further weight gain and more like metabolic dysfunction.
Yeah. And of course, we know that BMI is very problematic, but she's nodding her head. It is very, very problematic. And I certainly don't love that, but it is what's used in the clinical setting. It's used for insurance purposes. And diagnosing, unfortunately. But yes, it's not just BMI alone necessarily. It's kind of looking at all the other things that are going on in the body, because we know that weight in itself is not necessarily the problem. It can be part of the problem, but it's not always. There are plenty of healthy people who might be clinically overweight or obese. And there are also people who are overweight and obese or normal, quote unquote, normal weight with, normal BMI, again, in quotes, who have metabolic disorders. So that's that. And the benefits of the things we're looking at, it's really, improved glucose control, in some cases, weight loss. There are other cardiometabolic benefits. So kind of remembering, like a lot of people are kind of coming to these drugs these days with more pure aesthetic goals. But again, that's not really what they were designed for. And it makes this a little bit tricky. And the other thing that kind of comes to mind in just the use of these drugs, I think there's a little bit of for some people, stigma. I think there are a lot of people where it's like they're very open about using it, and it's obviously very widely discussed. So many people are doing it. But I think there is still a little bit of a stigma, and maybe people are thinking of it as like the quote, taking the easy way out or whatever. And I'm kind of just curious what you hear from your own patients and clients, like over the years, about taking medications, especially when weight loss is a goal, and what you want to share about that.
And I will say it has changed, like I would say in the last 5 years. And my take has changed as well, and it's been really interesting. So it just is so individualized. So I don't have like one opinion. It's very like patient focused or
Hmm.
client focused. So I don't think there should be a stigma if the medicine is indicated for you. So I think it should just be like if you have high blood pressure or high cholesterol. We take blood pressure medicines, cholesterol medicines like statins, things like that. When you get diagnosed with like type 2 diabetes, typically they'll put you on like kidney protectant like lisinopril. They'll put you on a statin. We're essentially trying to like mitigate disease risk. Diabetes and cardiovascular disease are very closely connected. So if you have type 2 diabetes, you're at increased risk for cardiovascular disease. So the great thing about these GLP-1, GIP, dual agonist medicines is that they really do target like the metabolic dysfunction that's going on like at the cellular level, not just weight. Like it's so much more than that. If we kind of like get into the science of like increased weight and how it's like endocrine active and like
Hmm.
disrupting the hormone function. So it's really targeting that. So if you need a medicine, you certainly should take it. And I still don't think taking a GLP-1 medicine is the easy route because it comes with a lot of restrictions. You have to take this injection weekly, and a lot of people don't like to do that. And also, they have to eat less. And if they eat too much, they feel sick. And that can ruin your day, or you're in the toilet, or you're having stomach pain. So I definitely don't think it's the easy route. It has replaced a lot of like gastric surgeries because you know, there were individuals that were having to, get their entire stomach surgically changed, which
Yeah.
was a permanent thing. And there was a lot of side effects. And I saw like malnutrition with that. So this is a much nicer way of doing it. But I will say that I think that these medicines are a tool to aid in weight loss. And it's a good negative feedback mechanism, but you really need to work with an actual provider like a doctor, a nurse practitioner, a PA, and do it the right way and be followed closely to make sure that the dose is appropriate for you. And I also think it's important to work with a dietitian because of what I was just talking about, that you still want to have like balanced meals with like protein, carbs, healthy fat, not just eating like protein shakes of like very few calories because you will lose the muscle quickly. A lot of people just will take these medicines and not really change behavior, but they'll just eat less of the foods that they were eating before. And if they go off of it, they gain weight. But I think it's a great time to have faster weight loss, still a healthy rate, but work and actually learn like, how did we get here? What are some of my habits? What are some of my barriers? What do I do? That way, when if you do have to go off the GLP-1, if it gets too expensive or your insurance drops it, you're not like in the dark with weight loss.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that comes up all the time on this podcast, whether we're talking about performance, recovery, or just making everyday nutrition easier, is the importance of having high quality but easy foods available when life gets busy. That's why I'm so excited to partner with Good Ranchers, a delivery service for all your favorite animal proteins, including chicken, beef, pork, and fish. They were founded by a husband and wife team who wanted better food for their own family, which I can definitely relate to as a parent. They source everything from local American farms and ranches, and they're all about transparency and knowing exactly where your food comes from. For me personally, having high quality, fresh proteins stocked and ready to cook makes it so much easier to feel well as an endurance athlete. I love that everything is vacuum sealed and pre-portioned out, so it's really easy to defrost whether you're cooking for yourself or for the whole family. And it's nice to have a variety of options so you're not cooking the same thing over and over again. I made a tasty stir fry with chicken breast, a pasta sauce with ground beef, and then I brought over all my top sirloin steaks to my parents' house and we grilled that for a delicious Sunday dinner. I was honestly so excited when my box arrived that I even bought a second freezer just to make sure I had room to store everything. It's something that I've been meaning to do for years, and this was the perfect excuse. So whether you want to try a one-time box or start a subscription, you can use code IRON, IRON, to save $25 on your order. And this is really important. After checkout, there will be a quick survey and you need to write in Eat for Endurance when they ask you how you heard about Good Ranchers. That is how you can be sure that you're supporting my show. So if you want to make it easier to keep high quality protein on hand to fuel your athletic and daily life, head to goodranchers.com, use code IRON at checkout, and be sure to mention the Eat for Endurance podcast in your post-purchase survey. Again, that's goodranchers.com. If you try it, let me know what you think. All right, let's get back to the show. I have so many follow-up threads on that. So first I want to follow up on like the typical side effects, because you were kind of mentioning some of those. There's a lot of potential GI side effects: nausea, vomiting, constipation, diarrhea, delayed gastric emptying, which you mentioned, appetite suppression, which is both good and bad. So, as we were saying, like the food noise, that's a real thing. That's really disruptive. That can take over your life. Like having that food noise be quieted is huge. That's a game changer for people. And that's very real. So I do want to acknowledge that. And I also agree that these medications are absolutely amazing for some people and life-changing. And they're also being very much abused in other circles and may not be appropriate for other people, which we'll get to in a bit. But that doesn't mean that you, just have one meal a day and that you can suddenly go from thinking about food all day, every day, to suddenly not thinking about food and then go, oh, I guess I don't need to eat, because malnutrition is that's a really real thing. And again, as you pointed out, like how important it is to work with a dietitian or some other provider who can kind of support you in that, because it's very, very easy to lose weight too quickly. And in doing so, you can develop nutrient deficiencies. You can lose a lot of muscle mass, which happens with most forms of weight loss, but particularly when you're losing it too quickly, you can certainly hurt your bones. Like there's so many different things that you can do where it can be very dangerous. And again, we're kind of still in the general population category. We haven't like pulled out yet the athlete population. We'll get there, don't worry. But so this is really just relevant for everybody. So yeah, I think that's something that we really need to be very careful about. And I'm still learning about all of this. And so I don't know if you want to kind of point to if there's anything kind of relevant in the research that you see. Like I've definitely heard about the number, like how quickly people develop nutrient deficiencies, or what happens when you stop these medications, whether it's not tolerated, whether you can't afford them anymore, or whatever, something happens. A lot of people do gain the weight back. So yeah, like maybe we can kind of explore kind of what you've seen there in practice and also in research. But before we do that, I just want to also emphasize what you said, like making sure that this is just one tool among many, that you're not just taking this as being like and waving your magic wand around and be like, oh, this is all I need to do. No, like you still need to, like, if you've had problems with food in the past, you need to address that with a therapist or a dietitian or whoever. You still need to develop good, healthy habits. You still need to move your body. Like we need to make sure we're doing all of the things and not just taking an injection and being like, that's it. So yeah. Sorry, that was my spiel. Back to you on
Definitely.
On what you have to say on that.
Yeah, I just think like when you're on a GLP-1 for however long your insurance will cover it, or if you can afford it, it's a great opportunity to put all the tools together. The physical activity piece is so important. Because you probably will lose weight quicker than you normally do with just like a pure calorie restriction. It's really important to do strength training to preserve that lean body mass. So at least twice a week doing strength training is ideal. And also like focusing on protein, prioritizing protein, having a high protein diet. Those are going to be like your two best ways to combat the lean muscle loss. Because with weight loss, you do lose some muscle as well. And the fat loss is a slower process. So we don't want to have like an intense restriction to where we're not getting enough calories and we're losing weight too quickly. And typically, we used to always say like 1 to 2 pounds per week is like the max that you'd want to lose, which without a medicine like this, it'd be like, well, maybe 0.5 pound to 1 pound, etc. Because of like the restriction was just so hard to endure. So it's really important to not lose your muscle mass. And the reason why is because our muscle mass is metabolically active, meaning that if you have more muscle, you're burning more calories at rest. This is an essential part of our metabolism. So we want to preserve that muscle and have more of like a slower weight loss to lose the fat and then have a nice like body composition. So like, I know I keep saying weight, and I think that weight is just like an arbitrary number essentially. And I think most people are looking for like body composition. They want more muscle, less fat. And then I try not to be like very weight focused, but
no, totally. And I've heard other people talk about like the studies that do exist. And I know we don't really know much about long-term use about these drugs. There's just so much we don't know, but there are studies about kind of when people go off, like how there is a pretty large number of people who do stop. I forget what the frame of time. I heard this recently actually on another podcast, but just how many people do gain the weight back and how it's not always like they're not necessarily gaining the muscle back, they're gaining fat mass back. And so, so it's just, again, kind of highlighting the importance of slowing the weight loss down, making sure that you're doing all the things to protect your lean body mass, but also just changing diet and lifestyle behaviors to support just overall health and not over relying on a drug, so that if and when you do stop this drug, we can kind of attenuate some of that gain back or, whatever is kind of happening. So yeah, so that's that. The other thing I want to talk about before we go into athlete specific chat is what does not constitute a GLP-1 agonist? Because I don't know about you, but I feel like I'm seeing so many food brands and other supplements kind of jump on this, trying to capitalize on the buzz, like claiming that they have, quote, GLP-1 boosting foods or whatever it is. It's ridiculous. So, we see fiber products marked this way, protein snacks saying they have like GLP-1 effects. And I really think it's such an important distinction. And this goes for anything across the board. Like food is not actually medicine. Like you hear people food is medicine. It's not actually medicine though. Okay. Like, and that seems medicine is medicine and food is food. And it's not to say that food cannot support health. Of course, like food has dramatic impacts on health and is so crucial to health, but food is actually not the same as a pharmaceutical. We have to really make that clear that food cannot replace a GLP-1 drug. And while like fiber and protein, like of course those things are important to promote satiety and they do a million other great things, they are not the same as pharmaceuticals. So I don't know if there's anything else you want to add to that. I just felt like I needed to get that out there because we're seeing so many of these ridiculous marketing claims. But
yeah. In the absence of like a medicine, like a GLP-1, GIP, as dietitians, we would always recommend, okay, like have protein, have fiber on your plate, like healthy fat. Fiber keeps you fuller longer, fat delays gastric emptying. So having balanced meals, and that was like the science behind it. And then these receptors are kind of mimicking like what a balanced meal would be. So I am not really familiar with any of these brands because I don't have cable, but I did look up, and I've been in Antarctica, but
oh, that's right. Like that's so cool. I totally forgot you're in Antarctica. Amazing.
Been like, yeah. So Pendulum, probiotics, berberine, like calling it like nature's Ozempic. People are just like, basically, I mean, the marketers are marketing. They are fabulous at their jobs. And they are using this term that people know to sell products. And hopefully there'll be more regulation with it, but it's just really busted at the seams. I always tell clients, even before all of this, like, don't look at the front of the label. That's like pure marketing. It is regulated, but they can get away with a lot. So just go to the nutrition label and just turn the box around or the package. So no.
Yeah. I just wanted to throw that out there to my listeners to really just make that distinction, because I think like athletes, like active people, I mean, everyone's targeted, but I think a lot of athletes are often, looking for something, and I don't know. It's just easy to kind of fall for some of these ridiculous marketing claims. So
100%.
Yeah.
Like, as a dietitian, like I'll fall for like skincare stuff, and like, luckily, my best friend's a dermatologist, and I'm always like, hey, what about this? Because I'm just not educated in those terms and that. So if I wasn't a dietitian, I could easily fall for these things because you just don't know.
Yeah. Hey guys, I want to take a quick second to talk to anyone who feels like they're trying to do all the right things when training and fueling, but it still feels harder than expected. That's something I see all the time in my work. Most athletes don't need more nutrition rules. They need guidance that's realistic, flexible, and supportive. That's exactly why I built Eat for Endurance. I offer free downloads, low-cost guides and masterclasses, and a monthly membership called Fuel for Life Crew. Inside the membership, you get direct access to me, live monthly calls, and a supportive community of active people who get it, all for just $39 a month. And if you're ready for more personalized support, I also offer one-to-one coaching with limited spots available. You can find all of the information you need over at eatforendurance.com. All right, let's get back to the episode. So now let's move to our lovely active population. Why do you think active people, and especially endurance athletes, might be interested in GLP-1 medications?
Yeah, so I guess I'll start this by saying that the word athlete has really changed, and even with like the endurance athlete crowd, we all come in like different shapes and sizes. And, there's a large sect of Americans that have started becoming endurance athletes or signed up for marathons or Ironmans to lose weight. So it was more like I had this problem and I got into athletics to help it. Those people that are really in it to just lose weight, be healthier, they could be great candidates for a GLP-1, and maybe they have some overeating or a lot of food noise that they've dealt with. And then you have a whole nother sect, kind of like the two extremes of athletes, if you will, that are really competitive, maybe professional, semi-professional runners, endurance athletes, etc., that are very thin and still have this idea that leaner is faster. And that was something that, was very pervasive when I was in high school and in college, which is totally not true. And it led me down a bad path personally. But it just depends on what type of athlete. So it's such a heterogeneous population now. So, and my clients are really such a mix. So it's hard for me to like group all athletes together.
Oh yeah, and we can't group all athletes together. It's athletes are humans, and that's what I always tell people. And I know like with my work, like you kind of just have like the only prerequisite to work with me is that you are an active person of some way, shape, or form. You don't have to call yourself an athlete or be training for something, but like I'm sure with you, like clearly with you, like you get someone who's maybe they are training for something, but they also have like hypertension and high cholesterol, and or maybe like diabetes, or maybe something else is going on. And so you are a human with all sorts of different things going on in your life and medical history and such. And so yeah, and certainly we are seeing kind of all shapes and sizes, ages show up to these races, or just wanting to be athletic and not necessarily compete. And yeah, so it's such like we have to bring like there's a lot of nuance to this topic, and as we've alluded to, that this drug is really helpful and wonderful for many people, assuming they tolerate it. But it's also incredibly harmful for some, and it can kind of put people in a bad place, even if they quote unquote qualify, or, it is on paper kind of seems appropriate for them, but ultimately they're not able to kind of make it work. So like, I know I've had a client come to me who was on, I think he was on Zepbound. I want to say he wanted to train for his first marathon. He was put on this for various reasons, for weight loss. He didn't, there wasn't really another reason. And we were talking about, and he was already under fueling. Like he was just massively under fueling. And I had to tell him, and I was talking to this coach too, I'm like, this just doesn't, like, this is just not appropriate for you. Like, and he had like lots of very strong beliefs about foods and what's, quote, good and bad for him. And I'm like, we cannot train for this race with you on this drug. Like it's going to be very difficult for you. And so it brings up lots of things, right? It brings up something you said to me when we were talking about this topic offline of like, people really need to be screened for eating disorders and disordered eating prior to going on, which most of the time, like, I don't think they are, right? They're not being screened.
Most of the time, they are not. They are not. I would say like a very high percentage is a no.
Yeah, very high percentage no. And you can go online and bypass a physician and just be like, I want to microdose this drug and you don't need to do anything and you can lie about your weight and you can do whatever you want, and just kind of do this stuff. So that's scary. And then the other thing that's hard is, I don't know about you, but like I can barely get my athletes who are not on GLP-1s to eat enough, and
it's
like,
true.
Right? Like, so it's like, it's a battle. It's a freaking battle. And there's so many reasons why people have low appetite, or, whether it's related to training or stress or whatever whatever is going on, underfeeling, like whatever is going on. And then, so we layer in these medications, even if let's say there is weight that could be lost, like they're not clinically underweight or anything. Let's say there is potentially excess weight that can be lost in a healthy way or whatever. So it's still really hard. So the question is, what are we risking? Especially if you're an endurance athlete, really, or you're just training really hard for something, what are we risking, and what are these like major concerns? So yeah, I thought we could spend a little time here, because there really are potential risks for athletic people, and I don't even want to just limit it to saying endurance athletes, because there are plenty of recreational athletic people who are going to the gym, going gym classes, spin classes, like doing whatever, and they're just super duper active and still have high energy needs. So where do you want to start there?
Definitely. Well, I do want to address the screening. That's something that I'm like very, very passionate about. Even personally, when I worked in like endocrinology, when I worked at an endocrinology clinic, I just wasn't seeing the screening going on for eating disorders. And we've been to a lot of like diabetes conferences and brought it up in like the Q&A and like advocated for this. So you have different types of eating disorders as well, right? You have like restrictive eating disorders like orthorexia, anorexia, where if they have a history of those, I have seen this personally. Basically, their appetite is cut, and then they just decide they may have not been in their active eating disorder, but they'll go into their eating disorder and something just triggers it. That can be very risky. I've had really difficult conversations with patients that way. So I am very like you should be screened for a restrictive eating disorder. On the other hand, we have clients who have more like binge eating disorder with like a lot of food noise and, want sweets and all of that. And they could really benefit from these medicines for the most part. So I have to even have nuance for that.
Yep.
So it's really just a case by case basis, but just bringing light to eating disorders, to relative energy deficiency and sport. Even in physician offices, people are not being screened. That's just what's happening. So it's a big problem. And I know we were talking about like Hollywood earlier. I've been like catching up on my shows recently, and there's 2 different shows that I watched that GLP-1s came up. And they were like reality TV shows. And one of them was like Love Thy Nader. And it's Brooks Nader, who's a model reality show. And she's basically like laying on the ground, like not feeling well. Her sisters are trying to get her to go to the hospital, and they find like all of these needles. And she's very thin. She's like a professional model, and was kind of like abusing the medicine, saying that like all the model agencies are just giving out GLP-1s.
Oh, that is terrifying.
Yeah. So that's one example. And then also my example is Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. We have Layla Taylor, who has openly struggled with anorexia. That has came out like in the past, and she's openly talked about it. And this most recent season, it was came to light that she was also on a GLP-1 now. So like seeking eating disorder treatment. So people that have eating disorders will go towards GLP-1s because it can really enhance it. And it can be really abused. So that's my spiel on that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really hard. And, with all that stuff. And that's why we have to be so careful about like who has access to this stuff. And unfortunately, again, like it seems pretty easily. I mean, Jesus, like a model agency is just like canning it out like candy. I mean, that's pretty terrifying. I mean, with our athlete population, as I was saying, like so hard to get people, like we already have enough low energy availability as it is. People are already terrified of carbohydrates. I mean, so many sessions are spent convincing people to eat more carbs, all this stuff. And, so many athletes, especially endurance athletes, are already dealing with GI distress. I mean, pretty much probably 75% of my people are coming in with GI issues, right? So
Right.
it's really tricky then if we're layering in a drug that is just basically worsening or potentially worsening all these issues. Like, I don't want to say across the board because not everybody experiences side effects. So there are people who, especially if the dose isn't too high or they find the right dosing and medication for them, like there are people who can tolerate it. But I do say I have a very, very strong reservations about an endurance athlete successfully, I use that word kind of cautiously, like what do I mean by that? But healthfully, however you want to say, using a drug while training for, an event or just putting in a lot of training sessions if they're not, how do you feel about kind of this use in the athlete population? Because you said you work with endurance athletes with pre-diabetes and diabetes. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. And I also work with athletes with REDS. I don't specifically work with eating disorders, but I have personal experience with that. Whenever I'm working with my athletes, it's weight management in general. Aside of GLP-1s, if they want to lose weight, I wouldn't say it's my focus, but there is that goal a lot of times. So you have off season and then you have your in season, you're training for your A race. So we have different times where, weight management can be more appropriate. And I always advocate to do that in the off season versus your marathon is in 2 months or whatever. So there's that. And then I agree with everything that you said about not eating enough. So the GLP-1s, most people are not eating enough or they're not eating balanced unless they're working with a dietitian. It's still a lot of come on, where's the carb here? Where's the protein? Where's the fat? Where are your balanced meals? Because they forget to eat. And I've had so many clients I've had to put on timers for meals or post-it notes. You still have to eat. And if you're prioritizing protein, which a lot of people already do these days, protein is such a buzzword and fiber's getting there a little bit, but you're not going to have enough carbs. Most athletes don't have enough carbs because we need so many. So it can really fall into low energy availability, loss of period, REDS, stress fractures, which I am no stranger to myself, redshirted many seasons in college. And then just overall intake is going to reduce your carb intake essentially, because most of our intake needs to come from carbs, especially as athletes. Basically, taking a GLP-1 is having a high fiber food before you go running, having a bowl of beans or something. You're going to feel really full and not really something that you'd want to do. So again, it depends on the dose and how the medicine is affecting you. So maybe a lower dose, but that being said, I work with mostly athletes and mostly people with diabetes, and my super niche is athletes with diabetes and pre-diabetes. And I still don't have a ton or even a handful on GLP-1s.
Yeah. And just understanding that this isn't a drug that you have to take. I think, again, this is just a drug that's on a lot of people's minds. And it might be appropriate, but it doesn't necessarily need to happen either. So do you think that endurance athletes can use this drug safely, or for them, generally speaking, this is something that you should really steer clear of at least when you're kind of training more heavily?
Yeah, I would say generally no. Blanket, I would say no for athletes in general that are in a training block, have a big race, especially the long, when we say endurance, these longer events. I usually work with marathon, Ironman, ultra runners. That's mostly a no. My yeses are very far and few between and on a case by case basis and how it's going. So overall, it's not something that I would advocate for at all in athletes.
Yeah. And let's say you have someone who's active, who, really is trying, who's on a GLP-1, who's really trying to be smart about their eating, but they're really combating that low appetite, that appetite suppression because it's hard to kind of force yourself to eat a lot, so like how, aside for kind of like some of the basics, like, fluid, smoothies, like all the things we usually say, right, for strategies, like how do you work around that? Because I mean, for me, that would seem like such an obvious, well, this might be why it's not appropriate, but I don't know if you have any other things you've encountered.
Well, we would always try to do like small, frequent meals, like every couple hours, like more of like the grazing, obviously the smoothies. And then it's hard because being on a GLP-1 is kind of like the opposite of intuitive eating, especially when you get into athletics. Like you may not have an appetite, but you still have to eat something today. And then when we put in like sports, we don't rely on hunger before, during, or after your workout, right? Because these hormones are suppressed. And like, even without the GLP-1s, even without my athletes who are trying to lose weight, just getting them to eat enough and like have hunger is really hard. And especially when they have like 2-a-day practices and then they're busy with school, like my high school athletes, it's really tough. I end up having them have like at least 6 meals, like 3 snacks per day, like really quality. And they feel like eating is their occupation. And, sometimes in like Ironman, we say, nutrition is the 4th discipline or whatever.
Yeah.
And, and ultra running is like professional eating contest, whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is like very much a dilemma. And honestly, you'd have to have a lot of support to do it well. You'd have to be, have your doctor, your dietitian. And without that, which is what 99% of the population is like, it just doesn't work.
Yeah. I thought we could talk about some of the unknowns, like what questions we still need answered with these medications. Because as I mentioned earlier, we don't really know the long-term effects, if you're on these for 20, 30 years, whatever. And it seems to be the case where if you want to mostly maintain the weight that you lost, that you kind of have to keep taking it, although a lot of people don't. And again, I don't remember what that stat is, but I know it's quite high that people go off of it. What do you kind of want to point out there in terms of the research gap or what we do know?
Well, that's a fact. It only works when you take it. So if you stop taking it, you're not going to have that assistance of the decreased blood sugars, the increased satiety, the decreased hunger. You're not going to you're going to have the food noise. So I've had clients that have had to go off of it and they've gained like 10 pounds like in a month, like pretty quickly. And then I like to do a little investigation. So like, what have you been doing this past month? And they had gone back to the McDonald's, or I'm craving the steak, or whatever it is. And I'm like, well, that's exactly what we need to work on. And I just had this conversation last week with a client. And because when they're on the GLP-1 and I haven't worked with them prior to them being on it, it kind of hides some of the stuff that you just don't see. So I thought it was really a great learning opportunity to see what her barriers were off of the medicine. And then now she's back on it. But I was like, okay, let's dive into that. Like, what do we have this food noise for? Like, what's going on in your mind? Like, what are you doing right now? Are you like bored? Are you anxious? We'll try to like work through like the hunger satiety scale, the comfort eating, all of that, the shortcuts. So yeah, if you go off the medicine, it is hard not to not gain weight. And it's true, we don't know the long-term effects. I mean, medicines like Victoza, we have like since 2010, we have that data. But just like blood pressure and cardiovascular medicines like statins, like they only work when you take it. So you can, and people are continuing to take them. But I just think it's really important if you ever do go off of them, which many people will for different reasons, that you also address these behavioral issues. You have some education about what a balanced meal is. All of that is really going to hold you without kind of like the crutch of the GLP-1.
What do you think about some of these ads like Serena Williams discussing her GLP-1 use and just like celebrities, or even, I know there's been a lot of talk about like Ariana Grande and like are all the people, Demi Moore, like all the people on the red carpet and they're like looking skeletal and kind of this return of the thin ideal. I'm curious, kind of more pop culture focused, but also the marketing of these drugs specifically. What's your take on all that?
Right. I mean, I kind of hate that for us as society. Like, I grew up like in mostly the 90s kid,
Yeah.
and it was magazines and like very thin, Mary Kate and Ashley, like their eating disorders. And it was just so pervasive. And, in the last 5 years, I felt like we've had a lot of more like body positive messaging that I was like, gosh, I wish I grew up in this, in this message. And like strong and like working out and all of that is like strong is healthy. And I feel like there is a little backpedaling going on. And like with the fashion, it's 90s, this whole idea. So on one hand, like the Serena Williams ad, I think is great for reducing stigma. Like you have this professional athlete who's also a human, who's also a mom, who's having some challenges because we're all truly humans and we can all, even as dietitians, we can all go through difficulty in our lives where we'll lose weight, gain weight, struggle with health issues. And so I thought that part is really great to reduce the stigma and just make it more like normalized in a sense. But, conversely, it's kind of like if you're looking for that competitive edge, which athletes are so competitive, even if we're just age groupers, I'm
Hmm.
competitive to a fault, unfortunately. Well, if Serena Williams is doing it, then I need to do it, like, especially if I'm like a tennis player, like, oh, well, I need to have that edge. So it just makes it more like this is the bar and if everyone's doing it, I have to do it too. So I don't love that part of it.
Yeah, it seems a little dangerous, especially because we're talking about an injectable drug, not just like popping well, not to say supplements aren't dangerous either, but there's the stakes are higher. Let's just say it that way. Yeah, no, I agree. I want to just spend one more minute on the whole idea of food noise for a minute because again, just like teasing this out a little bit because I certainly have had clients coming to me who are drastically under fueling. They're an endurance athlete and they cannot stop thinking about food or craving sweets or, that kind of situation. And when we
Mhm.
actually feed them and get them to eat carbohydrates and maybe kind of work on their relationship with food and taking food off pedestals and all that stuff, it's like that stuff tends to quiet down. And at least what my understanding of the food noise with these medications is that's very different. That's not that situation. It's more just, it's something totally different. I was just wondering if you could speak to that a little bit.
Yeah. So, like with food noise and as dietitians, when we work with athletes, especially that are always hungry, and it's like usually like hunger is a natural signal that you need to eat more, right? If we have like true physical hunger, I like to work with like emotional hunger versus physical hunger, and like physical hunger develops gradually. It's non-specific, whereas emotional can come out of nowhere and I want something crunchy. And like having that education and like working through the hunger scale, I think is just so basic and fundamental. But with athletes, it's like, why are you hungry? Okay, like when was your last meal? And like, what did you have for that meal? Like, did you just have like a banana? Did you just have oatmeal? Like, was there any protein? Was there any like healthy fat? Like, was it balanced? So, and then that can take away a lot of the food noise. And like restriction breeds like cravings, right? So if you're not eating enough, you're always going to be hungry. But if you're able to eat more, it does reduce that food noise. And that's like just like purely biological without these medicines. With these medicines, it's definitely like a dimmer, but there's also like a shut off switch almost. I've seen with like higher doses in some individuals, and everyone is a little bit different, like how they handle it. But it's just like, I'm not hungry, period, all day long. It's just like, okay, well, that's great, but we're still having to eat. And like,
Yeah.
I still want you to have meals. And I get a lot of pushback. And sometimes I have to be like the meanie, but I will happily be that person because someone has to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. So, kind of like wrapping up this discussion, like if an athlete came to you tomorrow asking about GLP-1 meds, what would you want them to know and really understand? Just kind of if you had to state that kind of concisely.
I'd like to like learn a little bit about the athlete and like why they want them and like what their goals are. Is it for blood sugar management, weight loss? Like, are they in active training? Do they have a race? I'd like to learn about the why. I think the why and the goal is like so important. Depending on that, I would either discourage them or encourage them. And like I said previously, for the majority of athletes, I'm going to discourage because of the inability to eat enough. You know, you don't want to get injured. Like everybody's so like the need for speed. And that was me to a T before. But like if you are injured and you don't get to the starting line, everything is over. It's all over. So leaner is not faster. And I would really discourage somebody that's about to train for a race, like a big marathon, an Ironman, even like a half marathon. I would discourage it. And like, I think timing is important. I would like to work with them if they're new to me, like just on the basics, and then really assess if I think it's appropriate or not. That's where I would start.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. Awesome. Well, I'm going to go through my quick bites questions and then we will send you on your way. What is your favorite pre-workout meal or snack?
Peanut butter toast for sure. Sometimes like with the sliced banana and a little honey, depending on like how long I'm going. But yeah, I'm a peanut butter banana girl through and through.
Awesome. And what about post-workout meal or snack?
I love eggs. Like avocado toast would be good with eggs or like a scramble. That's just easy. I don't do a lot of shakes very much. I find them to be a pain and they don't really satisfy me as much, but I really like chewing.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Although I do like my shakes too. What is the most exotic or interesting food that you've ever tried?
That's a great question. I think when I was in Morocco, I had this like 14 food sampler in this restaurant. And I think I told them that I didn't eat meat, but they gave me like lamb brains to try.
Oh God.
And I was like, they were like, what did you think of everything? I was like, I really liked this. And he was like, that was lamb brains. And I was like, what the heck? I told you I didn't eat meat. And they just thought it was hilarious. And yeah.
That's like when I went to Vietnam and we were so sick of eating, I don't know if it was like pork or some sort of meat. We were just sick of it. So we told them we were vegetarian and they gave us like a vegetable noodle soup with like small pieces of pork. So it's just smaller bits, not big chunks. So that's vegetarian.
Same.
Yeah, same. What is your favorite beverage?
Favorite beverage? I'm a iced latte girl through and through.
What is your favorite ice cream flavor?
Oh, ice cream. I could talk about that for quite a while. Okay. I really like salted caramel or salty caramel, or the like salted malted chocolate chip cookie dough from Salt and Straw.
Yum. Oh yeah. Salt and Straw is so good. And top 3 items of gear that are most essential to your active lifestyle.
My Garmin. I love my Garmin. I just had to like keep upgrading it, because of battery and like, this one's solar and I forget that it actually needs a charge. I mean, as like a triathlete, my bike's name is Sangiovese. She's a Bianchi, an Italian bike, and it's a road bike. And my mountain bike is Melly because I got her in Leadville. So I'm obsessed with my bikes, like to a fault. And always love like my AirPods because music, I'm really a fan of music and I've like done really well in races with a great playlist. And then I've done really bad in races where like I'm aging myself, but like my iPod died or whatever. And I didn't have it, but in Ironman, you can't use music, but in marathons you can. And part of like the love of running is just listening to music for like a couple hours straight or like a podcast or whatever.
Yeah. Are you training for anything right now?
I am not. And the reason is because I have like tried to register for like all world marathon majors for like the last couple of years. And I have not gotten into any of them. Like,
bummer.
And I really, really wanted to get into Sydney. So I have to reevaluate my goals, but not currently.
But you did just get back from a big South America adventure. So you were in Antarctica and were you anywhere else?
I was in Argentina for a couple weeks and then I went to Antarctica. So I definitely have like the travel bug, which is not really conducive to training, but like there I did like hiking and kayaking almost every day in Antarctica. And that was super fun. Definitely the coolest place I've ever kayaked. No pun intended.
Amazing.
Just like paddling through ice and having like multiple whales around us, like in a kayak.
Oh
so cool. Penguins like swimming near us. The problem is that I had to like paddle. So I couldn't just like be on my phone the entire time taking photos.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had
That
like
is
dry
so
fruits.
cool.
So,
That
and we
is
did like a polar
amazing.
plunge. So I did get in the water. I wasn't like swimming. It was like 23 degrees. So
Wow. Oh my God. And wait, so you're in Argentina and you don't eat meat, or that was just in this other place?
yeah, yeah. I I don't
That
eat
must have been
meat. I did.
challenging.
Yeah, it was hard actually. I will say I did go to an asada, and I'm like a flexitarian. Like I sampled like all the different meats that they had at the asada. And I also did like a mate tasting because I absolutely love mate. So I like sampled it, I had the experience, but I don't need to eat like a 6-ounce steak.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't been to Argentina since I was, gosh, 25. So it was like almost 20 years ago. But I just remember it's like you go there and you have like your bread, your steak, your wine, and like if you ask for a salad, it's like a few lettuce leaves and maybe a tomato. That was like
Yeah.
pretty much the bulk of it and most of what I ate. But wow, that's so cool. I'm so jealous. I got all the way down to Ushuaia on my trip, but I was, I did not have the funds as a 25-year-old to do the whole Antarctica situation. But we saw everyone who did Antarctica and it looked amazing and I heard about it. It was like the Galapagos and Antarctica were like and Easter Island. Those were like the three fancy things that like us backpackers couldn't afford to do at the time. So, but I was like, I will come back and do that someday because it just sounds amazing. Well, where can everyone find you, Courtney? This was such a great discussion. I appreciate your time and your knowledge. And if everyone wants to look you up, follow you, work with you, where can they all find you?
Sure. So my website is www.theendurancedietitian.com. So dietitian has 2 T's and no C. And also on Instagram, _endurance_dietitian. Also on Facebook. And I offer one-on-one consultations and take insurance.
Awesome. Amazing. Well, thanks so much, Courtney. Have a good one.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
That's our show for today. Be on the lookout for the 2 other episodes in this series, which will be coming out over the next couple of months. And a reminder, your support really helps keep this show going. Be sure to check out my brand new sponsor, Good Ranchers, and remember to mention Eat for Endurance in the post-purchase survey if you end up buying one of their awesome boxes. You can also support me without spending a penny. You can share this episode with a friend or on social media. You can leave a 5-star rating and review, and of course, hit follow or subscribe so you don't miss my next episode, and especially not the 2 other ones in this GLP-1 series. And lastly, please check out my affiliate codes and my merch on the shop page of eatforendurance.com. I have discounts to so many great sports nutrition brands on there, and my feeling stickers are tons of fun. And you can also visit my Patreon page to donate a few bucks to my work. Everything is linked to in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening. I will see you all next time.